As a US Navy surveillance plane flew in circles, dozens of Chinese Coast Guard and accompanying ships chased and encircled Philippine vessels in the latest confrontation in the South China Sea. As a US Navy surveillance plane flew in circles, keeping a close watch, dozens of Chinese Coast Guard and accompanying ships chased and encircled Philippine vessels in the latest confrontation in one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the South China Sea. At the height of Friday's 4-hour face-off in the high seas, a Chinese Coast Guard ship blasted a water cannon toward a Philippine motorboat, delivering food and other supplies to Filipino forces on a marooned, rusting warship that serves as the country's fragile territorial outpost at 2nd Thomas Shoal. Well, please subscribe the channel and share for latest information. China has steadfastly stood by its claim to virtually the entire strategic waterway, clashing with its smaller neighbors and drawing in the United States, Manila's treaty ally and China's main rival in the Asia-Pacific region. Washington and its allies have deployed Navy ships and fighter aircraft to promote freedom of navigation and overflight, build up deterrence, and reassure allies like the Philippines. There are fears that the recurring confrontations at 2nd Thomas Shoal, which lies within the UN-sanctioned Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone but is claimed by China and surrounded by its flotilla, could ignite an armed conflict pitting the US against China. Philippine officials said Saturday they would never take any step that could ignite a larger conflict, but would not be deterred in defending the country's sovereign rights in the South China Sea. Despite the Chinese blockades and coercive maneuvers, the Philippine contingent managed to deliver supplies to the handful of Filipino Marines aboard the BRP Sierra Madre and left without incident. The slightly listing Philippine warship donated by the US has been crumbling with age, but is still actively commissioned, meaning an armed attack would be considered by Manila as an act of war. 2 Associated Press journalists and several other members of the media who were invited on board 3 Philippine Coast Guard ships, securing 2 supply boats, witnessed the dangerous cat-and-mouse maneuvers in rough waves. It's part of a shame campaign. Philippine officials said they would press on to expose China's growing aggression in one of the world's most important trade routes. Filipino forces would continue to adhere to the rule of law and would not be provoked by China's strong-arm tactics, Philippine Coast Guard Commodore Tariela said. Regardless how dangerous the maneuver that they're going to throw at us, whether they use water cannon, whether they use military-grade laser, we are not going to allow them to make Philippine Coast Guard personnel on board our vessels to escalate the tensions. At least 38 Chinese ships were spotted in 2nd Thomas Shoal's vicinity on Friday, including a Chinese Navy fast assault craft and a hospital ship, the Philippine Coast Guard said. One of the Philippine Coast Guard ships, the BRP Cabra, was surrounded 5 times by the Chinese Coast Guard and other ships, but managed each time to move away until it was hemmed in near the shore. Also, fishing vessels from other countries, often chased away by the Coast Guard, now faced an escalated threat. There were reports of ship sinkings, adding a new layer of tension to the already fraught situation. The Philippines found itself in a precarious situation. Its vessels, often in the line of fire, were now in even more danger. The escalation was not just a concern for the Philippines, but also for other Southeast Asian countries involved in maritime disputes with China. The ripple effect of this law was starting to show. The international community wasn't blind to the brewing storm. The passage of this law was a loud and clear signal of China's intention to assert its national interests and challenge the US's position as the dominant military power in East Asia. The International Court in The Hague, which had nullified China's claim of control over most of the South China Sea, was now faced with a new, more aggressive stance from China. The stakes had been raised and the world was now on high alert. In the wake of these tense encounters, the world grapples with the question, what happens next? The ripples of China's actions are far-reaching. with the potential to significantly alter the balance of power in the Asia-Pacific region. China's assertive law, authorizing its Coast Guard to use force against foreign vessels in disputed waters, is a clear indication of its intention to stake claim and assert its national interests. This move not only raises the stakes, but also heightens tensions in a region already fraught with maritime disputes with Japan and several Southeast Asian countries. This development could further strain China's relations with these nations, but the repercussions extend beyond the region. The United States, a key player in the Asia-Pacific theater, has been watching these developments closely. The US has a long-standing treaty alliance with the Philippines and has renewed its warning that it stands ready to defend its ally. The US response serves as a reminder of the global implications of these local encounters. It's a high-stakes chess game where each move can drastically shift the balance of power and potentially ignite a larger conflict. The International Court in The Hague has previously nullified China's claim of control over most of the South China Sea. However, the recent law passed by China and the subsequent actions by its Coast Guard present a direct challenge to this ruling. This defiance has the potential to undermine international maritime law, setting a concerning precedent for future disputes. In this intricate web of alliances, disputes, and national interests, the actions of one nation can have profound implications for the global stage. The South China Sea, a critical waterway for global trade, has become a powder keg of tension, with each nation carefully watching the others, waiting to see who makes the next move. As we await the world's next move, one thing is certain: the stakes in the South China Sea have never been higher. In this game of maritime chess, the world holds its breath. We've journeyed through the alarming chase of Philippine vessels by Chinese ships and the subsequent escalation of tensions as China authorized its Coast Guard to use weapons against foreign vessels. This development, no doubt, has far-reaching implications for international relations and the power dynamics in the Asia-Pacific region. It's a clear sign of China's intention to assert its national interests, potentially challenging the United States' dominance in East Asia. As the world watches, the question remains: what happens when international waters become a battleground? The answer lies in the waves of the South China Sea.